as usual, waiting for all the software to update, because software is not meant to be fast, I guess. Twitch chat. We cannot do this without the Twitch chat, of course. Turning on a tablet now, that should show a dashboard, but it doesn't. Yeah, that's more like it. Okay, so I think we've got everything ready. Usually on Thursday I stream about accessibility, web accessibility, because that's my job. My name is Eric. I work at ING, which is a big Dutch bank, and there I am responsible for the accessibility of the web components that they use, reusable web components that are part of a design system. This time I will not be talking about accessibility, or not directly, will not be the main topic. I actually want to discuss my website. I think, like quite a lot of web developers, I tinker with stuff in my own time. And I don't mean just streaming. I'm going to change the volume a little bit. Maybe that changes. When we talk about streaming, sound is one of the most complicated things still, but I think I got it reasonably nice. So, usually when you build a website, especially if you use... I should take a step back probably. I am a web developer, so I like to play with stuff, and one of the things I like to play with is my own website. You can see it now on the screen. It's one that features a big picture that I made by myself. I used to be a photographer. I like to be creative every now and then, so I want to feature that on my website as well. Portfolio is really far behind, because making websites always seems to be more fun than writing the content. I guess that's how I became a web developer. I don't know. But my website is always kind of a playground, and I think for a lot of web developers that's also the case. It's the place where you can put whatever you like, where you can try out whatever you like, try new technologies, try new tricks. Everything you do on your website is pretty much fair play. And one of the interesting platforms that ties into this, I'm gonna zoom in a little, because why not? And I'm gonna put my head up a bit more. Hey, I'm moving. I think I can be way up here. Yes, my websites have content, or at least they should have. I always forget that part. And a happy time zone to you as well, of course. Yeah, websites have content, but that's always the part where I struggle. I like to build websites, not fill them. I'm not a content person, I guess. It takes a lot of time and effort. I guess building websites as well, but that's for me the fun part. So what I looked at when I built my website is indie web. And they say the indie web is a people-focused alternative to the corporate web. They should have added maybe a definition of corporate web as well, because this doesn't tell me much. A is not B. A is an alternative to B, so I guess that doesn't tell us much. What the indie web for me is it's like a community, it's a movement. I don't know how. Here they even say the indie web is a community of individual personal websites. They stand behind some standards that I really like. I think the basic idea is of indie web is that you use your website as your own platform. Ooh, I'm too loud. See, just before you joined me, I said some of the toughest part of streaming is still sound. I think this should be better now. I'm still in the green, but not in the red. That's good, right? I hope so. The indie web is a collection of standards, principles. The main thing is that you have your own website. Your website is your platform. You own it. You decide what you do with it, and whatever data you publish on the web, your data is yours. So the idea with a lot of indie web principles is, for example, if you want comments on your website, you should be able to sort of own your own comment. And there are a lot of indie web people that can post comments to articles of other people, but they post them on their own website, so they still own the original content. And I really like that, the idea that your website is your place. I mean, it really aligns with a portfolio. Having a portfolio and a personal website is also really encouraged by a lot of people because it stimulates you to write, it stimulates you to have your own blog, it stimulates you to experiment, like I just said. And there's just so many reasons. It's much more fun to read blogs and see other people's websites than visit some anonymous platform. I'm gonna change the mic a bit. I hope this is better then. There's so many buttons to press. I think this should still be right? I'm not hearing anything strange. I'm gonna listen to my mic a bit. Oh, that's hearing your own voice. There's also some background noise. Maybe that helps as well. That was it? Okay, that was it. I was too close to you. I guess that's not bad. So the IndieWeb, they have this website. There's a lot of information here. A lot of it is really interesting. Principles over project centrism. Self-do dog food instead of email. I really like the term self-dog food, not the way, not the word itself, but what it stands for. It means that whatever you build, use it yourself. If you are your own customer, then you learn from whatever you do wrong, and it's really good. So in a short way, I like the IndieWeb and all its principles. And I've done something with my website that I think really aligns with this. If you visit erikroes.nl, this is my personal website. So it's hosted by Netlify. Some of you might know Netlify. Netlify.com, the fastest way to build the fastest websites. Netlify is pretty hot in website country. People like it. Why? Because you can have a repository on GitHub, for example. Netlify detects any changes in that repository, and if anything changes, it will update and it will push the latest version of your website. So basically, you can keep your entire website, you can keep it on GitHub, and people like to create then what they call static websites, and Netlify just pushes them. So really popular. And what is a static website? That's also really important to tell you. A lot of people, when they build a website, they use a CMS. It's a content management system. So you have this one spot where you keep all your content. Then you have this whole system, and in the end, it delivers some sort of website. But you have to have a place where you keep your content. I use WordPress, which is one of the most popular systems by far. It uses what they call a database, and a lot of CMSs, they use a database, which means that every time somebody loads a website, they make a sort of request, it goes into the CMS, and the CMS says, hey, then we're going to grab this information from the database, and this is how we want to style it. We're going to mesh it all together, and you're going to have a website. That's really good. It makes you really flexible. It adds things like being able to run a web shop. I used to run a store on the web, and because you have a database, that store can see, hey, you don't only look at this web page, but here is your shopping basket. You have this many items in your shopping basket that you want to buy. This is your address. This is your username. All this information about you, about the user, is also specified in this database. And every page you look at is gonna show this specific version of the page that is specifically made for you. So it also works with comments and basically anything that stores data and customizes or individualizes or personalizes a website, it probably uses a database. So that's really good for stores, for commenting, for big platforms. I mean, if you have a user account somewhere, it could be a Facebook platform, but also Reddit or Twitter or any social media account. It's going to be tied to your name. It's going to be tied to your information. And there's probably a big database behind it. And it should be really fast because everything they make, they generate it on the fly. And it's also the downside. There's a lot of software in between, which can slow things down. You have to access a lot of data. So what a lot of people do now is they have a static website. And a static website is basically what we always did in the beginning, before there were fancy programming languages and before we used databases. You have a page, you put it on the web. If a user comes to your page, they just request this file from the server, and the server gives you this file, exactly that version of the file. You won't see a username. You cannot log in. It's static. Nothing will change. If you look at this page today, it will probably look the same in an hour or tomorrow. It's static. It's just a file. It makes use of browser conventions like clicking links and actually loading URLs and accessing files. It's kind of funny because on one hand it feels really fancy and new because everybody uses it because it's so fast. Static websites are really fast because you don't have a lot of dependencies. You don't have to load many files. You don't have to access a database. You don't have to run all this code before you get a website. You just pull in the file and your browser does the rest. So people, they really like it, and it's really simplified. And Netlify is one of the web pages or the websites that does this. So they even do it for free. I think I can see it here, pricing like $0 a month. Of course, that's the account I have. You can build one thing at a time. You have 100 gigabytes of bandwidth in a month. That is a lot for a hosted website, especially if it's static, because you're not loading code. It's only the pages. You get 300 build minutes. I'm not going to dive into what a build is right now. Continuous deployment, so every time you change something, it will redeploy. You get a new website, and you even have access to add-ons. Never used an add-on, so I'm not even sure. But this is really popular right now. So people like to use static website generators. They make this really simple website and just produce these files that you put on the web, and then you get like the fastest and most simple website you can. Which I applaud, because usually you stick very close to the code. It's also quite a big difference with the trend these days. You see a lot of what they call SPAs, single page applications, which means that you're technically always on the same page, but the code in the backend is making it so that they draw in new data, and that you get a different interface, and so it looks like you're actually on different pages, but it's all on the same thing. So they call it a single page application. You often get the feeling that you're using a phone application. It's not. It's actually a lot of code doing the work. And every now and then I use my laptop and I visit a website, and my laptop fans start blowing and I get all this noise and it starts producing heat. Usually that's when an SPA is being shown in my browser. I mean, websites should be so very simple. I don't think they should be stressing for the browser. But when they are stressed, in my case, it's often an SPA, a single page application. So Netlify is very popular, and GitHub. But usually there's something else behind it, something very simple, very popular right now. I'm building something with it as well, is 11t. 11t, a simple static site generator. Making this larger as well. So 11t in its most basic forms, it turns a markdown file into a website. If you ever write content on the web for GitHub, for example, but also dev.to, blogging, I think Medium does it as well. There are so many platforms that accept markdown files. If you are a developer, it's like second nature to write markdown. Having a platform like 11t where you can write your blogs as markdown, you run a single command to generate a website from those files, and then you push those files to GitHub, and basically you have your website. It's such an easy workflow. It's really contrasting with something like WordPress, because WordPress, I'll show you this tab, I think, no, this one. This is WordPress. I'm gonna enlarge it a bit. This is the back end of WordPress. That's what I should say. So WordPress is like this age-old platform. Everybody uses it. It depends on a database. You can speed it up a lot by using a good host and changing a lot of settings. But by default, a lot of people will install it. They will install a default theme or buy one. Themes are really, really important to people. And then you add some plugins. And with each theme and plugin, your site probably becomes slower. It probably becomes more insecure because people can access this backend. They can change things. They can access your database. This is all on the web. Whatever you put on the web, it adds a spot that might be insecure. And that's one of the dangers with WordPress. It's such a big platform that if anything goes wrong, if they find an issue with it, if they find a way to crack WordPress, A lot of people will suffer, basically. A lot of people will be tested. If you don't keep your website up to date, then somebody else will check for vulnerabilities and see if something is open. So that's a big downside of WordPress. So what I do right now is, it's the more I discover about it, the more unusual it seems to be. I run WordPress on a local server. So I have a small computer on my ground floor. It does all Linuxy kind of things. And one of the things it does is it hosts WordPress. You can even see it here in the address bar, that the address is not www.ericruz.nl or something like that. It's actually a number. It's the IP address of the computer on my home network. So it's 10.0.0.22. It also means that only I can access it. So this here, what you see, is actually generated by a computer here in my house. So that brings me back to IndieWeb. This computer holds all my data, but it's mine. It's on my ground, on my premises, as they call it. It's literally inside my house. I can touch it, I can move it. It's my data to own and to do whatever with. But nobody else can access this. This website, this backend, is only available for people in my house. So there's like a physical security measure. If you're not on my network, you cannot access the backend of my website. But then how can people visit my website? That's the important part, because this is only the backend. It also has a lot of plugins, many out of date. You should keep your plugins up to date very much because of the security issues I just mentioned. New features. There are so many plugins. Like, can we? Yeah, I'll check this later. WordPress has this inventory, this whole marketplace with lots of plugins. I don't know if they have a number. Oh, here, extend your WordPress experience with, wow, almost 60,000 plugins. That's a lot. A lot of them are outdated. Some of them are so strongly recommended that people declare you crazy if you don't use them. Featured plugins, for example, Akismet, as I call it in Dutch. I don't think it's a nice name in English. Now I think of it, Akismet or something. Akismet. It's good that I never considered this, but it's like a default plugin for lots of people. The classic editor, also a default plugin. Jetpack, by the makers of WordPress. They're like default plugins. So you download this whole system, the CMS. But people assume you run lots of plugins. There's one for me that's really important, and that's the whole static story. Again, I have a WP to static, WordPress to static. I'm going to share the link in the chat for a second, just so you can have a look as well. This is not, oh no, I'm using not even that one. I'm using Simply Static right now. And it's, in a way, it's actually worse, because if you look for a plugin and you say, hey, last updated 2 years ago, that's usually not a good sign. That probably means it's insecure. People don't care. It's not maintained. It might not even function. You also see here tested up to version 4.9. This plugin hasn't been tested with the latest 3 major releases of WordPress. Like, this is an old plugin. You usually don't want to test this. You don't want to touch it. The other one I just showed you was 8 months old, so it's probably better than this one. But what this does is, I have it on my website. I'm going to show it. So I'm now back on the back end of my website. I go here to Simply Static. It has this big generate page, and you can say generate static files. And that means that this plugin is going to look at your website. It's going to visit every page that you have, and it's going to generate a file from it. So you're, especially like we said earlier, WordPress is good for websites where you log in, where you have specific information for a visitor, but it doesn't really, it's not really relevant for a portfolio. WordPress is not really good for portfolios because you don't need a database. You don't have that much data. You have your content, that's what you want to show. Your portfolio items, your blogs, your About Me page, whatever you want to show. But you don't have specific users. So when you say generate static files, you're going to get a folder on your server with static files. So for every page that you usually get in a browser, you get a new file. So instead of a front page that is dynamic, this is dynamic. It doesn't show, but it is dynamic. You get this index.html file. It's this one on the top right now. So it actually generates a single static file. And then I get the comment on my plugin, but it works. So what? Yeah, that's the most important part. And the only thing is that I have to pray, I guess, to keep it working. If it ever stops working, I might feel tempted to fix it myself, because I think I really like this setup. So this plugin goes through all your pages, all your files, and it's in a way it makes a sort of copy of them in a separate folder, but it's a copy that other people can visit. It's sort of anonymous. So I have this folder now with almost 2,400 files. I don't think that's really necessary. And that's on my server, so I'm just gonna log into my server. Oh, this is a terrible color to see, but this is my web server with all kinds of stuff I never clean up. So I now logged into my Linux server, and I'm not even on my web server, am I? I'm just gonna drag this to another window so I can log in, because I'm very afraid that I'll shout passwords otherwise. Yeah, so this is my web server, amongst many things. It's called Purkje, and there's a folder where my files are kept. And I go to Eric Cruz, that's where I keep my website, and you see all these files. I'm just going to reply to the chat in a second before I get distracted on this part. You see all these files. This is my WordPress site, but if I go to another folder, it's called RK Static. Then you see these generated files, and the fun thing is I can just get status. I have these files synchronized with my GitHub account. So there is a repository on GitHub that has a copy of all these static files. So what my workflow usually is, I change something on my website, and I can access anything on my website. It's just a folder that I can access. So this is a Windows folder that I cannot make bigger easily. I'm sorry for that. But this is a typical WordPress folder. And I have the themes. I have this theme called... Where's my theme even? Am I in the right folder? This is cleaner than what I usually have. Is this the right folder? It's not the right folder, of course not. This is the mess that I'm used to. Yeah, much better. So there's this big mess that is my web server. And it's my mess, nobody can touch it, that's the good part. And there's a folder called Stretch, which is what I call the theme that I have right now. And there are all these files, and I can just edit them. I can open a file, I say, hey, open, I'm not even sure what Visual Studio Code, oh, not bad. So I can open this in Visual Studio Code, and I have this changelog because I never use it on this PC. I just open this PHP file on my PC. Why? Because it's on my server, and I can easily access whatever is on my server. It's like it's almost on my computer. It's just like an extra disk, and this is the way you want to work on a website, if you'd ask me. It's like a development environment, but really cheap, because I run this on my own premises. I can do whatever I want, I can change whatever I want, so this is really easy usage. And that's the folder with WordPress, and then there's another folder that's way up. And that's the static folder, and this is the folder with the generated files. And you've got, for example, an index.html, and I think I can show this as well. Does it also open in Visual Studio Code? Let's do that. It's really just an HTML file, and this is what it generated. I'm just going to scroll through a little bit ahead with everything that should be in a head, and I can control whatever is in there, because I control everything. And there's a body with everything I want to have in there. It has a header. It's all the markup that I want to have in there is there, and nothing more than that. It's fully under my control, and that's what you want with a website. Unlike the thing Marijn that just shared, a client has discovered WordPress is indeed not fast. Yeah, usually that's the theme, and the add-ons, you can have such a big mess with it all. They had a new website made by a marketing company. Depending on all kinds of plugins, they don't really understand. Yeah. it's so easy to install plugins that the easiest way to fix things is by adding another plugin, and the worst thing you can do is probably add another plugin, because you get this whole big mess with lots of plugins. Don't, rather not. But it's much better when it's just on the backend. So if my website is slow right now on my own server, I don't care. I'm the only person that visits it. I change things. I mess about. I can make the biggest mess that nobody cares about. I can delete files. I can make it show nothing. I can really do whatever I want. I can have a build process if I want to. I use SAS, SAA or SASS. English, syntactically awesome style sheets. I use this when building my website. Does anybody notice this in the end result? I don't think so. But I can play around with this because it's on my own server and nobody notices. So you can do whatever you want on your backend side. And when you want to generate something of a result, you go to this plugin, Simply Static, you say generate static files, and then I log in, which is for me a really normal thing to do. And I can just commit it to GitHub, and I can push it to GitHub, and it automatically updates. So this, what you see, is on Netlify. Netlify is like the gold standard for personal websites right now. Oh yeah, and then your client said it was the hosting. You point to an old website on the same host being very fast. Yeah, it's very easy to blame the hosting when you're talking about WordPress, because it's the database. It doesn't process the code fast enough. I mean, a better host will help, of course. There's a lot of work being done on the server, so a better host works well. But right now, if I compare to normal WordPress, I only pay for the domain, and for the hosting I pay nothing. I pay $0 a month, and this is really, really fast, because that's the thing I shared on Twitter as well. I think I have to show Chrome. So I'm gonna show my website on Chrome on the right side, and then I have to. It's gonna tell me I need a incognito window. So that's why it's so dark. So yeah, I'm gonna have Firefox on the left side, Chrome on the right side. Should look the same, hopefully. Zoom in a bit. And there we have this extension called Lighthouse. So just to show you, Lighthouse is identify and fix common problems that affect your website's performance, accessibility, and user experience. So it basically runs a test on your website, and I do it in an anonymous tab, because anonymous window even, because that way my extensions in my browser don't play a role in this all. And there I get these numbers that people care about a lot. It says performance 100 out of 100, that is, accessibility 100, best practices 100, SEO 100. And why are they so happy? Well, because we have a static website, and because it's hosted on Netlify, it's very, very fast. It's very fast. It's like 0.9 seconds to show the first contentful paint, and the first meaningful paint also on 0.9 seconds. So within a second, you have a website that shows something useful. That's really, really fast. And the time to interactive, so that's when you can press buttons and click links and whatever you want to do, that's also 0.9 seconds. So within a second, the most important parts of the website are loaded. I don't have numbers, because I usually don't care about these kind of things, but if you look at web stores, speed is everything. Like, if your website is 1 second slower than your competition, you will probably lose customers. And Google uses these performance numbers also for indexing, so also very important. And yeah, of course I would do nothing, but I mean, it wouldn't be my website if accessibility wasn't at 100, but that's because it's all under my control and it's all static. There are pretty much no external dependencies. There are no big databases. It's so slim and so simple. I created the whole theme myself. A little bit about it more later. But best practice 100, you can just go through this step by step because everything is under your control. I don't need many plugins. I don't need many external dependencies, because often these external dependencies and these plugins are also the parts that you can't control really. I mean, I have changed WordPress plugins to make them more accessible, because by default they will just do what works. I mean, they're developers that make these things, so they do what's fast and what's easy. That's not always the best choice. So you change the plugin and then you update the plugin and you've lost your changes again, or they add something that doesn't work with your changes. In theory, I could keep my website like the same 5-year-old version of WordPress if it works for me, and I don't need anybody to touch it ever. I just generate these pages, and if that works, then it works, and that's all I need. Yeah, it's about control. I keep coming back to control, but that's really what's so very nice about it, and that's how I get these 100 scores. And that's how I get WordPress to run something useful. I mean, I used to have my own host. It's what they call business hosting, which means it's not the cheapest package, but also not the most expensive one, because then you want this virtual private server and you've got even more work to do. But it took some seconds to generate my page. I've had pages that would take like 4 or 5 seconds to load. I'm just going to show one. This one I did quite a lot on performance. I used to have a web store, and it's currently on vacation. This is also a WordPress website, but it's a store. And I've done a lot for performance, but it's a store, so you're limited in what you can do. And here you see the scores it gets, and I really spent a lot of time on this, but it has the first contentful paint on 2.7 seconds. The first meaningful paint also on 2.7. Time to interactive 4.9 seconds. So it takes almost 5 seconds to do something on this page. You get 80 for performance, 79 for accessibility, 64 for best practice, 91 for SEO. I spend a lot of time on this. If I compare this to other websites, it's a really good website. It's not a really big store, but I spend a lot of time on this website to make it really good and to stand out. And there's a lot of good practices in this, and there's a lot of things that other websites don't have. These are pretty good numbers, but it just doesn't compare to a static website. It just makes it so easy. So what are some of the things I've done to create this? Well, of course, the most important part is the plugin. So I run that from my backend. I have set up a GitHub account and a GitHub repository. It's a secret, so nobody can see it, so nobody can touch my website. But you could even ask people to work on it. I think I have an... sorry, a bit burpy. I have a second repository specifically for the theme. I think that would be a bit more logical to share with others. So if I go to my repositories, there is Stretch. Do you find it? Yeah, I have a badge. Thank you. Stretch, this is the folder that is my WordPress theme. I also just push it from my server and change it whenever I like. Apparently last time 2 months ago. So the main part is GitHub. It's Netlify. I still have my original host. It somehow feels good to have it available. I don't know. I pay for it. They also keep the domain. So my domain goes through my own host, and then it's connected to Netlify. I also run statistics on my own host right now, because statistics is also this sort of interactive thing. And I could choose between Google Analytics, which is not really under my own control, or I could host my own, and I can control what data people give me and what data I keep, and I can say, yeah, what do I really want with statistics? I just want to have some views, like see how many people are on my website, how many people were reading this article. I don't need to know in what street you live or whatever. And that's the control you have when you do things on your own server. So that's also very indie web. And the theme, of course, I made myself. There's this image, I think it's this one. Every now and then I look it up, because I think it's one of the, I'm going to share the URL in the chat. It's one of the most useful images you can have when making a WordPress theme, I think. It basically says, if you create a theme. These are the pages that you need. And if somebody tries to load this or that page, and the file behind it is not available, this is what they see instead. So, for example, they have there's a page slug theme. So you can make a theme for a specific page that you've made. So let's say your website has an about page, and you want a specific theme for that page. You say, hey, my about page should feature much bigger or smaller pictures depending on your ego. You can make a specific theme for that. And this image basically says, if you don't have a specific theme, we will take not the slug but the ID. I think that's basically the same, but still. And if you don't have a specific ID theme for a page, then you go to the general page template. And if you don't have a general page template, you go to the singular template. And if you don't have a singular template, you go to the index template. So the most minimal website of all, when you're working with WordPress, should only have an index page, or could only have an index page. And I think this is a really great tool to get working on a theme. I mean, I'm not a professional WordPress developer by all means, but I was able to make a design first in just HTML and CSS, then to convert it to WordPress, and this was one of the best tools for me to index it all. I think I've sketched a bit of an image of how things work. Are there any things you would like to know? If you're in the chat right now viewing, let me know if there's anything I can tell. I know it's really uncommon to do this. Everybody has these fancy static website generators. Is there anything specific, any part that is shocking or so? I don't know. I'm not seeing any questions pop up yet, so I guess I'm still safe. So if I had to write the entire workflow, so I have my WordPress backend, which depends on files that I own, that I have. I can change these files. I can add posts. I enjoy all the pleasure that there is to be found to having tons of plugins, including the decrease in speed. There are very many things you can do with WordPress. The options are endless, and I can do them all in my backend. But the difference is, when I'm done doing whatever I want to do, I go to Simply Static, I generate static files, I go to my terminal, I see, hey, I have new static files, I add them to my GitHub repository, I push it, and I commit it first, of course, and then I push it. And once it is pushed, Netlify will automatically update my website. So for WordPress, I think this is one of the cleanest flows you can have. You have all the benefits of all these plugins. You have the benefits of being able to use all their themes. You can use pretty much anything in the WordPress ecosystem, but you're using it all on your own premises. I think Simply Static also has a website. Is it still here? I'm just going to show it. They also mention a lot of upsides. Simply Static, the static site generator for WordPress. Never worry about WordPress hacks again. So Netlify detects the change and pulls those files on its own. Yeah, Netlify is so easy to use. I think I can log in like this. Press a button. This is Netlify. I also have another tool on there. Probably more going to get added. So it basically says in very light gray, of course. I didn't design the website, so I didn't check contrast. Want to deploy a new website without connecting to Git? Drag and drop your site folder here. So you can even drag a folder with website content, static files, and you can drop it here. Or you can say new site from Git. And when I say new site from Git, it's already connected to GitHub, I think. Is it connected? Authorized, yeah. And it's going to scan your GitHub account and says, hey, you have all these repositories. Pick one. And when you pick one, it automatically generates a website. So I think this is like, if there's any benefit from having modern technology, it's not going to be the big builds you might have and the endless JavaScript tools that you can install. It's probably things like this Netlify, where you can just add a website and it works. So you have a GitHub account. You can even add. I didn't even. click further. Let me find my, this is an old one. So I can even say which branch do you want to deploy. So for me it's always the master branch, but you can even deploy a different branch. So when the branch changes, well, that's even easier. You can have a build command, you can have a publish directory, advanced things. I don't have advanced settings, awesome. So it's really easy. If you want to push a website for free, I think this works great for portfolios. I think this works great for communities. If you are part of a club, if you just want to make this sort of folder online, I mean, how many websites are there that are essentially just static versions of an offline folder? I mean, it's very, very easy to use. And don't they have these unique selling points here? What's a website without unique selling points? What was the other one called? W2 static. Here. This is the other one. Get started, clone it, download it. Yeah. Oh, it doesn't even list all the benefits. Well, the main ones are speed. They are security, because nobody can touch your backend or your database, and you still get everything that's part of that very expensive WordPress ecosystem. It's really big. You can use so many tools. You can put whatever you want behind this. You can still make this SPA if you want it, but you can use your WordPress tools to build it. You can use all your JavaScript tools. You can use frameworks. You can use whatever you want. But I just use plain old WordPress and just convert it into pages. And they even have some add-ons. So you can even use search, because search is one of those things that doesn't really work with static, but they have ways around this. Cloudflare workers. Cloudflare is also a host that can do things. Google Cloud deployment, Netlify deployment. So you can even skip the whole GitHub step and push to Netlify directly. I didn't do that. I like using GitHub and having this sort of break that I can pull, like, hey, I did something wrong, stop deployment, remove it. Git helps you with that, version control. So I don't push to Netlify directly, but I think I can show it. Is it still here? I used to use the other plugin as well, but there was something that went wrong. Processing, so many options. Advanced options, very advanced. Where is it? It's not crawling, not processing, not advanced. Deploy? Oh, I think it is here. So by default, this plugin will this is the other plugin, the one that I don't use. It didn't work for me. It can push to a subdirectory. That's what I do, and then I push it to GitHub. But it can also make a zip file. It can push to Amazon A3. It can go to Bitbucket, Bunny, CDN, GitHub Pages, GitLab, Netlify, and FTP. So you can even automatically deploy it if you want it. I like the GitHub step, but yeah, that's what I like. I guess that's about it. Really, it doesn't feel all that complicated. I think I use something that's really simple, but I really like the result. One of the things I still want to do, I have this big to-do list. One of them is add color. Surprise. There's like 0 color on my website. Another thing is I want to add comments. There's this great indie web thing called Web Mentions. I'm just going to search through it separately because I'm not familiar with the website. Web Mention, indie web. So Web Mention is a web standard. Hey, thanks for joining. If you have any questions, or maybe I should repeat what I just said in a short version. We're talking static websites, so I'm just going to say I still want to add some comments. Web Mentions is a web standard for mention and conversation across the web. What this basically does is people can mention your website, your article, whatever you like. They can mention it on Twitter, for example. And thanks to the magic that is Web Mention, you can draw it into your website and you say, hey, this many people noticed my website. They have some examples, of course. I'm just going to grab the first one. I guess that's what everybody does. I hope he still uses it. So this is one of the people behind Indie Webcamp. And it has 4 likes, 4 reposts, and 1 reply. It looks like a Twitter message, but it's actually up on his own website. So he controls what he has, and he looks at other websites to see what people do with it. let's see if there is a 386 articles. So I'm going to grab an article, residing my blog post pages. Very relevant. So he has an article posted, and it's like any article except it's on his own website, and at the end you will see, hey, it has 2 likes, it has a bookmark and a reply, and this reply was actually not made on this website. It didn't go through this website, it went from Mastodon, and Mastodon is like a Twitter alternative. Might have missed this in the beginning, but why pick this setup over Jekyll, Hugo, Site.js? Yeah, so Jekyll, Hugo, Site.js, you've got Gatsby, you've got 11t, there are tons of static website generators and they're all very popular. I choose this because I run a website on my own server. So I have, this website is physically in my house. It runs on WordPress, it's hosted here. It has a backend that I'm the only person that can access this backend. And I get all the benefits from WordPress. I get the speed, I get all the plugins, I get the whole ecosystem, I get the themes, I can make posts easily. If I look at the post, for example, I right now have a Markdown plugin because I just like Markdown. I can even... So I can write my posts in Markdown. Why? Because I benefit from this whole ecosystem that WordPress is, but I don't have a database. I don't have the issues of security or speed that you could have with WordPress. So I kind of simplified my setup by taking the part that I did like about WordPress, the backend, but I isolated it and created my own frontend. So in a short way, that's why I used it. Do you know the easiest, least technical way of publishing my local hand-built PHP site as a static site on my live server? Local hand-built PHP site. So I guess that means you don't have a CMS. A lot of websites do have a CMS. Yeah, I don't know. I just use a WordPress plugin. It sounds so easy. You would say that there is like a PHP crawler or something. I think there would be some sort of crawling tool. It's not something I know right now. You can already hear from my voice that I'm guessing. But there are... I would go looking for a tool that would crawl my website and generate static pages. If there is one available for WordPress, there are multiple actually. I think there's one for web pages in general. It wouldn't surprise me. If in general I have like this rule for myself, if I can think of it, probably somebody has done it already. The last time I thought I had a great idea and I thought I was going to be rich, I looked up on the internet and saw, oh, many people are doing this already. That's usually the solution. It's not so good when you want to be rich, but it can also save you a lot of time because you don't have to build the stuff, somebody else already did it. So yeah, and that really worked for me in this case, so I hope this keeps working. I'd make a crawler to load the pages using PHP and then save the output as HTML files. I did that for my site. Yeah, well, if that's something that's open source, maybe you want to share it, but that's basically what this plugin does as well, and I think a lot of people can use that. There are so many ways to build a website, but especially for portfolios, for simple community websites, like I recently joined a Twitch team, as they call it, a website that still needs some improvement. They also have a blog, basically. So you have these articles, and you have a bit of navigation, so you get a mission statement in our community, and like, I don't have numbers, but it feels like 99% of the web consists of blogs and portfolios and simple websites with about pages, and they could all use a static website. I think every one of them could use a static website and make it real easy for them. I think I've told pretty much everything I want to say about my website because it doesn't feel really complicated. Maybe I should write it down sometime as a sort of tutorial, more step by step. I think people could use that. Then you can actually replicate it. But this is pretty much it. So if anybody wants to know anything else, I gladly talk about it. Otherwise, I'll just continue my evening behind a different screen. Maybe my Nintendo Switch. But I think this is about it. So if there are no further questions, and I think there are no, you can always find me on Twitter. I'm really easy about my website. It's so, I'll share anything. I'll answer your questions. Well, then that's probably it for tonight. Thank you very much. Thank you for the comment also on, some comment on the parsing crawling. It's too specific to my site, which is mostly static already. The dynamic parts do some fancy parsing, but in PHP you could also use the output buffer to save the output to a file load. That's even easier. Yeah, it shouldn't be that hard, should it? But that's I think that's famous last words for many developers. It shouldn't be that hard. Yeah. Any questions later, feel free to contact me, and I hope to see you next week. I've got some really great speakers lined up. I've got some people that I spoke to that I really want to give a platform. If you have any suggestions, like you want to speak yourself, you want to join me on my show and say, hey, I've got something to share, I'd love to give you the platform. If there is anything you would like to know, like, hey, I want to ask this or that person my questions, like I've wanted to speak to this person for so long, please have them so I can ask questions. I would love to host them. Also, if there are people that you want to give a platform, you say, hey, this person could really use a platform, I want to amplify their voice, let me know, and I'll gladly share it. But for now, I already have some plans, and I'm really excited. I can't tell you anything yet, but stay tuned, and hopefully till next week. Good night.